Children watched the dark woods at the edge of their town. For a long time they watched without knowing what they were watching for or why. They felt as though they had to watch. One would say to the other, "If I stare harder, the penny will fall off the nightstand." The child would lower her eyelids and focus her entire being at the woods, as the other quietly slid the penny onto the floor. For a while, watching seemed to be magic, even if they knew they were the ones making it. Summer, fall, winter, spring. It was always dark in the woods. Light seemed to slip into the fist of the trees, made safe by their keeping. Years went by, and the children's vigilance, which had begun out of, who knows, a dare, a whim, you know how kids are, slowly began to shift. The two came to believe that their watching was necessary, a moral good that must never be abandoned. As they grew older, the world grew older still, crumbled and faded away. Now adults, by nearly all measures, they remained childlike in their simple devotion to their task. Never did they waver, never did they blink. They were the watchers who knew that the lock of the town was safe from the woods, as long as they did not close their eyes. What makes horror fiction different from other genres, what makes it important, is that it is both about fear and it makes us feel afraid. In a typical horror story, the figure of terror stalking the characters across 200 or so pages merges with the book gently trembling in your hands. Let me give you a comparison to explain what I mean. Imagine looking at a painting of a tin can. Now imagine drawing your thumb against the lid of the tin can painting and watching tiny droplets of blood form on the surface of your thumb. That is horror fiction. It is what it does. The dual nature of horror writing leads to the central question we will explore as a class. What is a horror story's purpose? To answer this, we'll start by noticing different kinds of horror: terrifying others, technology run amok, monstrous bodies. We'll talk about what lies beneath the surface of these fears, keeping in mind that while these encounters occur in the murky, half-light spaces of horror fiction, they can nevertheless affect our reality in peculiar ways. For example, when writers like Poe, Barker, McCarthy, Quirino, and others show us the maggot-ridden underbelly of a corrosive society, they challenge what we think we know about how the world works. Among the most jarring encounters that horror fiction stages is the confrontation with the self. Dread and terror push past our usual defenses and justifications. When we read a story about the brooding mysteries of childhood, the same vulnerability bubbles up again. The familiarity and preciseness of these emotions is hardly shocking to regular horror fiction lovers, and yet, when we feel the exact same fears, we realize that we have not outgrown them. They are still with us, lingering, watching us. Two key ideas will be true for us in this class. One, honesty and self-discovery are the beating red heart of horror fiction. And two, in the broadest sense, horror fiction wants us to be alive to the possibilities of other ways of knowing and being. Here's something else that will be true. The monsters in our class will offer us glimpses beyond ordinary experience. Class discussion and writing prompts follow the narrative structure of most monster stories. If you've ever read Frankenstein, watched an episode of The Walking Dead, then the horror story arc is as familiar to you as the setting sun. Cataclysm, panic, survival, breakdown, encounter, and recovery. In our class, we will discuss an example of each stage drawing from literature and film. Additionally, each stage will be punctuated by a mini lecture and an activity. Students in our class will also reflect on these ideas in relation to their own writing and to the writing by other students in the class. Because horror seeks to provoke strong feelings, we want this class to be immersive. What we mean by immersive is that we will be staging all of the prompts in efforts to inspire our students' writing. We will create visual, aural, and sensory elements to spark your creativity. These sensory elements are meant to be playful, although they will serve a more serious purpose. There will be moments when each student can choose to go as deep into the darkness as they dare. But however far you do go, we, your teachers, your guides, we too will be watching you, keeping you safe.